Two players that have been suspended. The Bengals suck. Are the Steelers actual contenders? We'll talk about it up next here on No Buts About It. What's up, everyone? It is Josh Butts here with No Buts About It. I'm in my dining room in Indiana. Chus is in his basement in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. First of all, let's get to some quicker news stories before we get to our normal teams we cover, because these are some important topics that the people need to know. So first of all, just a few hours ago, we found out Trevor Lawrence will be headed to IR, which very likely means that for the rest of the season, Mac Jones will be the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I sent that information to a group chat I'm in, and the immediate response was, shoot, Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be useless in fantasy. But we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. But first of all, let's start back at the beginning. Just this injury happened, this concussion that put Trevor Lawrence in injured reserve was caused by linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair. We've been talking about Azeez Al-Shaair a lot. This is Azeez Al-Shaair, linebacker. Two different people, completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but this was Azeez Al-Shaair, linebacker for the Houston Texans. First of all, did you think the hit was dirty? Have you seen the video? Have you seen the play?
I thought it was 100% dirty. I mean,
okay.
I definitely think that it was. I mean, he laid into him like just head to head. I mean, it didn't look clean at all. I mean, sometimes you can kind of be like, maybe. I mean, everybody's been talking about it. I mean, when we talked about the suspension in the Chargers game with the Steelers, with like on Muth and stuff like that, I felt like that was a little. I didn't see that as much as a suspension. And that's like, I'm just comparing that as like, oh, that shouldn't have been necessarily a suspension. I mean, he had a track record for it, but this one, I mean, he has a track record and it looked dirty. So, I mean, you get double whammied. And on top of that, Trevor Lawrence exited the game and now he's out for the rest, more than likely the rest of the season. I 100% think it was dirty. I mean, if you want to like throw in if it was targeting or not, I mean, that's one thing or another. Maybe he wasn't intentionally targeting per se, but he was just going in, laying in for a big hit. Either way, it did not look good. Yeah, I can say that. It did not look good.
Yeah. I think, and Kurt Benkert actually responded to my tweet on this. I commented on his tweet and he responded back to me. And we discussed it a little bit. He was saying like, Azeez has the right to maintain his spot and, protect that first down line, which he does. I agree with that part. But I think where the issue was when Trevor began to slide, and there were other people arguing like the slide rule shouldn't exist. We can debate that later on, but right now the slide rule does exist. And so when Trevor began his slide, Azeez still appeared to kind of dig his forearm into the head of Trevor Lawrence. And that's where the problem is. And Azeez, to his credit, whether he means it or not, I don't know. We can't know that. Has come out and apologized.
Which is good.
Is good. And there have been some horrible jokes made about Azeez and his faith, and that's not cool. There's stuff that shouldn't be happening, no matter what. But the fact is, Azeez Al-Shaair has had a history, like you alluded to, of these dirty hits. And he has been, I don't know that he's been suspended before, but he's definitely been fined before for this. And that is something that the NFL VP came out and said that came to into consideration when they were coming up with the suspension. Now, I think the Houston Texans GM also made a good point, and I want to ask you about this.
Yeah.
He said there is inconsistency in the fines and the suspensions that NFL players receive. And he's brought up Brian Branch. He brought up Derwin James. He brought up a bunch of different players. Do you think that there's inconsistency in the penalties that the NFL is laying out?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it is quite apparent. I mean, I think they need to be a little bit more consistent and look, because I feel like if you go back and watch a bunch of different games, and it can be a random game that means nothing, and it can be a primetime game, like whatever, you have Lions and Texans or something like that. It wasn't obviously Lions and Texans, but like you throw out a primetime game or a big game, something like that, or it could be a smaller game. There is a lot of similarities in some of these hits that some of these players are putting on these other players, and they're getting suspended for it, and nobody's talking about them. And then there's ones where people are like, that was a crazy dirty hit. And then the NFL just doesn't do anything about it. They just look away and they're like, oh, it wasn't. And I think he does have a good point with the consistency thing, because I think initially at the beginning of the season, I thought that the NFL was cracking down on it, because obviously, as I've mentioned before, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, that Chargers player that got suspended for that hit on Freiermuth.
Was that Derwin James Jr.?
It was, yeah. And I know he has, had a track record too with some hits before, but I think him getting, I thought at the beginning of the season, I was like it happened, and everyone was like, really? Like Freiermuth got up, he went with the next play. I mean, this is a very different situation, but Derwin James got suspended for what, couple games, 2 games, or at least one, I know for a fact. And it was like, really? Like, I don't want to say soft necessarily, but like there's ones that are like kind of questionable where you're like, okay, maybe. And then what?
One game.
One game. Okay. So like you have like the ones that get suspended one game, and it's like, okay, well, it didn't really do a lot. And then there's ones where it's like certain things happen. And I feel like just suspending and fines and everything in general just don't make any sense. I think another thing that's kind of crazy is like the unsportsmanlike conducts too. I want to throw that out there too with George Pickens and Josh Allen. There's a comparison. George Pickens got an unsportsmanlike conduct for pointing in the crowd with 2 fingers like this, form of what looked like a gun, and he got unsportsmanlike conduct. Josh Allen did the same thing, but just didn't have his middle finger in it, and he got nothing. So there's points where it's like, where do you draw the line? Where do you suspend people? Where do you get people in trouble? Do they have to have a track record in order for you to get like long-term suspensions and fines? Do you have to like fly under the radar with some of these hits? And do you have to be like mediocre and like have bad, like, I mean, I'm just curious, because like there's just some really weird hits in the NFL, and there's been some really weird like penalties and different things like that just I feel like are inconsistent, and I feel like that's been going on in the NFL for years, and I think they need to crack down on it. I thought they were going to crack more down on it with the Chargers, because like I said, I thought that suspension was a little soft. So I figured, okay, yeah, they're just laying out all kinds of suspensions this season. This will be known as the year of suspensions for literally everything. And then everything kind of fell off for a little bit. And then there were some other hits that you see on there. I can't name them off the top of my head, but I'm sure somebody out there could nitpick a certain hit somewhere in the last 80 games that have been played this entire season and probably tell me that there was a dirty hit in there that probably should have been at least on the same level of Derwin James. It should have been a suspension. Maybe not Shaair, but still where you're like, okay, yeah, maybe. So in the end of the day, I rest my case, but yeah, I definitely think there's some inconsistencies, and I don't know if you agree or not, but
I do. I think, and obviously the NFL likes being in the media, so maybe this is part of that. Maybe they like people talking about the refs and dragging on the refs. But I think if the NFL wants to take the refs seriously, they should come out with a chart or some sort of like, just categorical list that says like, hey, if this happens, this is the fine or penalty. If this happens, this is the fine or penalty. Because the same thing happened with Andre Yoshibas. He got fined for the bow and arrow celebration. But Travis Kelce does that all the time. And now, to the NFL's credit, they did withdraw that fine. But it was like, okay,
why did you? I was like, why'd you do it in the first place?
The players need to know what they can do. And then, same thing. Maybe, and this is just an example list. I haven't gone deep into this at all. This is just top of my head. But like, say, hey, if you have this late hit on a player and it results in them being knocked out a few plays, and it's considered a dirty hit, that's going to be this penalty. If it knocks them out of the game or knocks them unconscious, like the Trevor Lawrence, what appeared to be knocked out for a little bit, that's this. That's obviously worse. That's going to be different categorically. So that's something the NFL needs to do, I believe, to help both the players and the fans understand what's going on. Also, we don't need to get into this, but hip drop tackles were supposed to be a way bigger thing. How many penalties have you seen for hip drop tackles this year?
Way more fines. Yeah.
They're just fining players later. There have been multiple times this year where Jamar Chase has been hip drop tackled, and fans have been like, hey, isn't that what that's supposed to be? And then the NFL comes out after the game and is like, oh, yeah, he was hip drop tackled like 4 times in that game. So here's some fines. But anyway, this just goes back to the whole conversation. The NFL officiating needs completely revamped, and we can talk about that deeper at a later time. But you actually, this next story you brought up, you told me this before the show. I completely missed this. So I want to make sure that the viewers know about this, the listeners at home, because we're getting into fantasy football championship season, and those deeper players could impact your league. Diontae Johnson has been suspended by the Baltimore Ravens, not by the NFL, by the Ravens. And so I'll let you get into this a little bit more, but this is big because they just traded for him. So what do we got?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because not 2 weeks ago or so, maybe a little over 2 weeks ago, but the Steelers played the Ravens, and Diontae Johnson was in the game, and he had mentioned that, Steelers fans, and I'm not necessarily the fans, but the Steelers organization as a whole really showed him a lot of love. And he seemed like he was on a good track. He was happy to be in Baltimore. He was in Carolina for a small stint, had his moments, obviously had some up and down injuries and whatnot. I mean, Diontae Johnson being Diontae Johnson, but he went to Baltimore. He was healthy. He looked like he was getting himself involved. And during the Philadelphia Eagles-Ravens game this past Sunday, it's being reported that at some point in the game, Diontae Johnson just refused to go in. There's really not, I haven't read too far into it. There hasn't really been anything more said about it. But Diontae Johnson, as directed by the coach, said, hey, go in. And he was just like, nah. And that being said, resulted in a Baltimore Ravens organizational suspension. And I just think it's a little interesting because they just traded for him. Like we said, he was going to be kind of more of an asset in that Ravens offense that has very small windows in regards to wide receivers, because you have Zay Flowers and then the wide receiver drop off is kind of, there. I mean, Bateman, I get it, is pretty decent. Nelson Aguilar just never seems to be able to catch anything. You still have Likely and Mark Andrews as well as Derrick Henry on as a running back wide receiver type thing, but they can only do so much. Same thing with Justice Hill, but we really thought that Diontae Johnson would be a little bit more involved in the offense, and he was going to be, but then something sparked in his head and he just decided that he just didn't want to go in, which results in his inevitable suspension, which will only be for one game. It's just this Sunday. I don't know who Baltimore plays off the top of my head, and the Giants, which I don't think it should be too much of a threat to Baltimore, but nonetheless, they're going to be without DJ for a week, and hopefully maybe the suspension will maybe help Diontae Johnson figure out what's going on with him. Maybe there's a little bit more there that's causing some issues that made him not want to go in the game. But this isn't good behavior at all, especially for a player that's brand new to the team. I mean, even if you were old to the team, I mean, as soon as I heard about it, I immediately thought of Antonio Brown and his whole situation of him, not necessarily not going into the game, but him throwing his jersey off and running away in the middle of that Jets Buccaneers game. So I think about that, and I think about him having a little temper tantrum and getting traded to the Raiders and stuff. But nonetheless, DJ is suspended for this week, and I'm assuming it'll be just 1 week. But but from a fantasy perspective, from a Ravens normal perspective, you probably shouldn't have anything to worry about. You're going up against the Giants this week. It's not rivalry. It's not anything like that. You should be fine. But from a fantasy perspective, you may want to consider trying to pick somebody else up. I don't know what type of players or how many players are in your league, or players as in teams. I don't know how many teams are in your league, but definitely probably go pick somebody up if you don't have somebody to replace him. But then again, I don't really see a lot of people utilizing him in like not deep leagues. Like 10 and 12 leagues, I don't think people are utilizing him. In like anything more than 12, you might be a little cooked. You may have to go and look for like Trey Tucker might be available. Westbrook, whatever his name is, I can't even say it. It's like Westbrook Inouye or whatever. Yeah,
he's a tight end, isn't he?
No, he's a receiver.
He's a receiver.
Yeah, okay. He gets like 3 receptions for like 90 yards and a touchdown each game. He's been really consistent over the last 3 or 4 games. He's always obviously a really good waiver wire pickup, especially in deep leagues and if you need somebody to replace DJ. And nobody's really picking him up. People are just kind of like looking past him because he's a Titans player. But I wouldn't if you want the points.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think this is interesting because obviously Baltimore wanted Diontae Johnson because
they traded for him.
They traded a day 3 pick for him, which I mean that's not like we have to have him, but I mean it's something. And I saw comments like everyone was looking at, they're like Diontae Johnson has 0 fantasy points, and the comments on a lot of those posts were like, oh well, yeah, he sucks.
I was no, it had nothing to do with that.
I don't think so.
It's a very different situation than like Mike Williams in Pittsburgh. Like the Steelers are genuinely not using Mike Williams right now, whereas the Baltimore Ravens are genuinely trying to use Diontae Johnson. He just doesn't want to be used.
But like he's a good player, so I don't know why. I want to know why he didn't want to go in against the Eagles. Did he ever have this problem in Pittsburgh?
No, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, he never really had. I mean, from what we know, I mean, he had his issues, but he never had anything like this drastic where we had to do like an organization suspension or have any problems with him, like not going into games. I mean, sometimes he would give half effort and like not always force plays. I mean, he was kind of at moments like Claypool and like different ways like that. But I mean, he came in clutch when he needed to. I mean, he was never like a top tier receiver, like some of the like George Pickens or even Antonio Brown, if you want to keep going further and further back. But I mean, he was a good, solid, in many organizational terms for the NFL, he was a good wide receiver too. And I think he would be pretty solid in Baltimore if he would give himself the chance. But I don't know. I'm looking forward. I guess Baltimore just has to accept the fact that Diontae Johnson's probably not going to be their wide receiver too. Because if he continues a lot of these problems, because like I said, in Pittsburgh, he didn't have a lot of these problems from what I know. Like I said, he had his moments where he was kind of like diva-y, but I feel like everybody in Pittsburgh has their moments where they're kind of diva-y. I mean, you can go back Pickens, Kenny Pickett, Diontae Johnson, Chase Claypool. You can even go back as further as Le'Veon Bell, Big Ben. You can keep going further and further back. I mean, everyone kind of has their moments, but never like this. But I think people in Baltimore might have to slowly accept. I mean, if he continues this behavior up, that they might just have to roll with Bateman, Aguilar, Flowers, and their team. I mean, unless they draft a wide receiver, which they could have with that day 3 pick.
This is so weird. I'm going to continue to follow this because I think this is fascinating. I would think if you went from the Carolina Panthers to the Baltimore Ravens, you would be ecstatic to get on the field.
And especially since like Baltimore's like actually like a competitor this year. I mean, Carolina's not going to be competing for anything until, and definitely not this year, maybe next year if they get lucky, but more than likely in another couple of years. So I don't know. I definitely, I would, like I said, I'd be ecstatic, especially considering that even if Baltimore doesn't win the division in the North, they're still going to be the 5th seed most likely in the race. And that's still good. And they'll probably end up having to play. Well, it'll depend on where Pittsburgh and Houston and everyone finish, depending on the seeds and stuff. So we'll see.
Okay. Before we're going to talk about Pittsburgh. So stay tuned if you want to hear about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chus has some thoughts. But first, one of the UPitt grads that we've talked about on the show, one of Chus's favorite draft prospects going back a while, a few years. Went to the New York Jets, didn't really get much playing time, but now he has been picked up off the waiver wire by the San Francisco 49ers. So Chus, Christian McCaffrey goes down. Jordan Mason goes down. They've still got Patrick Taylor and Garado, whose name I'm probably saying wrong. I believe he's a rookie.
It's Guerendo. I think so. It's Guerendo. So
okay.
Guerendo.
He's a rookie as well, I believe, right?
He's young. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going off memory here. But anyway, so Izzy Abanikanda gets picked up by the 49ers. You've probably talked about Izzy Abanikanda more than like anyone else on this show. I've talked about him a little bit as a potential guy the Bengals should go after. Bengals never went after him. Stan's talked about him as someone the Jets should use more. They didn't ever really do that, but you're our expert on him. So what are the San Francisco 49ers getting with Izzy Abanikanda?
Well, first of all, I think it's noted right now that Izzy is going to be third on the depth chart. But I think with these three running backs, I don't expect all these other running backs to come in at any point for the rest of the season. I'm assuming San Francisco is just kind of running with this three running back core, which is Guerendo, Guerendo, Patrick Taylor, and Izzy. And they're running with those three. And honestly, I think with Izzy, I think that's really fascinating is the one thing that's really cool about him compared to a lot of these other running backs that you could pick up or sign or whatever is I think with him specifically is I think he really wants that chance to start. When he got drafted to the Jets, he really never got that chance to be not necessarily even be a starter per se, because obviously you're behind Breece Hall, but like he never got the chance to even make the depth chart. I mean, they brought in Dalvin Cook to push him down the line. They've had all kinds of different weird moves that they've done over the past year, never really giving him a shot. And even considering cutting him this year, just for him to have like a pretty decent preseason from what Stan has said. And then his whole story of making the roster ended up happening. But with Izzy, if he's just like anything that he has been and in college, he has that burst and he has that speed. He's shorter, but he's quick. And honestly, I mean, he had, I think, like 20 some touchdowns with Pitt whenever in his last year in at University of Pittsburgh for the Panthers. He was super run heavy. He was a super huge part of the offense, especially after losing Kenny Pickett and having to rely on a whole brand new offense. He really started cooking. And in that 2022 season, and not that he wasn't in 2021 with Kenny, but he really had his moments there too. But in 2022, it was like, for me, it was really where he started to shine. And then he ended up declaring for the draft and getting drafted by the Jets. And I've always been super huge on him. Like I said, I think he went really way under the radar. I think that, you know, for a running back like him, I think having 20 plus touchdowns in a season is insane for a Power 5 school. I mean, obviously the ACC and Pitt weren't having crazy matchups that year, but they were still having some decent matchups that year. So Izzy obviously had some decent teams to go up against. And they also won the bowl game that year against UCLA. So that's always a fun thing. So I think with Izzy, it's going to be a very fascinating situation because with the 49ers, they have three running backs, and what they do with them is remains to be seen. Now, I think Izzy being third on the depth chart right now is subject to change, and it'll really be dependent on how they utilize him. I think this article from NinersNation.com is like a really good point on it. If you have the time, definitely go check it out. It's written by Kyle Posey. But basically he kind of points out the idea, and I agree completely on this, is that Patrick Taylor doesn't have like the same type of explosion like Izzy does or Guerendo do. And Patrick Taylor could be utilized more as a running back on those passing plays because he's a very good running back blocker. So what could end up happening is you could have Izzy and Guerendo being used as your burst running backs at running back 1 and 2. And then although Taylor is running back 2 on the depth chart, or even 3, he's still utilized in the offense by having him more as a blocker. Now, I don't know if San Francisco will do that, but if they want to utilize all 3 running backs, that's how I would also do it. And I definitely think that Izzy, since he's being given the opportunity to actually be on the depth chart and probably be used, considering San Francisco doesn't have a lot of running back options right now, will really have a good spark to be shined. I mean, if anything, I don't think anybody remembers this, but Izzy Abanikanda scored the first touchdown in the 2023 preseason.
I didn't know that.
I remember that because I remember that. He was the first player to score a touchdown in the 2023 preseason, and everyone mentioned it. I remember it. I remember it just like it was yesterday. But yes, so I think that he not necessarily get a touchdown, but I think that he'll really show his worth over the next couple of games. And I'm really excited to see what he does in San Francisco. And yeah, and he's on a championship team right now. So they're championship contenders.
I don't know.
Well, not this season, but like they know how to go to Super Bowls, man. Come on. You're telling me that Sam Darnold behind Brock Purdy didn't change Sam Darnold's life? I'm just saying.
Okay. I thought you were saying this year, though.
No, absolutely not. The San Francisco will be lucky for a 7-seed wild card spot. I'm just saying in general.
Like you can ride with San Francisco all you want, but I'm one pride with the Detroit Lions right now.
Well, no. I listen. I
got 2 points.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So two things I think people need to remember. So first of all, Jordan Mason. When Christian McCaffrey first went down, everyone was like, Jordan Mason, who the heck is this guy? He's not going to play very well, He's not a starter. Kind of slept on him a little bit. But the people that took a risk on him in fantasy that first week he played, it paid off. Because that 49ers offensive line is good in the run game, especially when Trent Williams is in. They are also great at run scheming in general. So I would not sleep on these guys. Maybe don't start them this week. But I'm just saying if you got an extra spot, maybe pick up Isaac Guerendo or even Israel Abanikanda, because like you said, and I will have that, I've got that article pulled up. I will put that in the description of both the show notes for Spotify and Apple, and then on YouTube for the full show, and then for the cutout here. So that link will be there. So you can read Kyle's article there. But maybe pick those guys up and just hold on to them, because they might be useful in the playoffs. And now you might also be saying, Isaac Guerendo is a rookie. He's a young fourth round pick from this draft. Izzy Abanikanda, he's from 2023, round 5 pick. People have kind of decided what he is by this point. I just want to point out, Israel Abanikanda is 22 years old. Isaac Guerendo is 24. Yeah. So yes, Izzy was drafted earlier, but he's also way younger. And that's not to say that he's automatically going to be bigger and better than Isaac Guerendo or Patrick Taylor Jr., who's 26, if you were curious. But it is to say Izzy has time to develop. And if Izzy can get into a system, a running back system that allows him to develop, that allows him to learn, that could be good for him. And that could allow him to end up on a team as that RB1, as that RB2. There are a lot of teams that could use an explosive running back like him. And yes, Christian McCaffrey is going to be hurt. He's going to be out the rest of the season. But he'll be there to help coach, I'm sure. That just seems like to be the type of guy that he is. That if he's able to be at practices, he's going to be there helping these younger guys out. So this is going to be beneficial to both Israel Abanikanda and Isaac Guerendo, in my mind. Patrick Taylor Jr. is a bit of a different running back. He's 6'2", 217, about the same weight as these other two guys, but he's quite a bit taller. So more of a pass blocker, like you kind of alluded to. But we'll see how Kyle Shanahan decides to scheme these guys up, how he decides to use them. But these are three guys, especially Izzy and Isaac, that I would be paying attention to, especially for free agency next year, to see what we get, more so with Izzy, because he could be a pickup later next season.
Especially in those dynasty leagues. I've had him stashed away for the last year or so in my dynasty league. I drafted him, and I haven't gotten rid of him. I just have this weird feeling with him. So, but
I don't want to use his time with the Jets as an indicator for his career because of how young he is and the fact that the Jets offense has just been bad with the run game. They've struggled in the pass game, but their run game has been so much worse. There have been weeks where Breece Hall just hadn't even touched the ball in 2020.
And the thing is they also don't even they haven't even utilized him. I mean, he, as I mentioned before, he would get his depth chart wide or running back 3 spot, and then I never will forget them signing Dalvin Cook and then him getting pushed down. And it's just really you're gonna sign him Dalvin Cook and you're not even gonna use Dalvin Cook, and you're gonna scratch healthy scratch Izzy Abandokan. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So it'll be cool to see him actually probably most likely be utilized in San Francisco's offense. And like you said, his that O-line over in San Francisco is very good with the run. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think there should be some confidence and some research done into Izzy Abandokan. But you had some beef with a graphic you saw on Instagram. I
did. Yes. I did.
This is a hard stop in transition.
Okay, I was thinking of the other graphic because there's the other graphic with George Pickens versus Josh Allen. And I was like, we already talked about that, but I was like, what do we?
Not that graphic. Not that graphic.
No, different graphic.
That's in the past. We're moving to the future. 4 contenders in the NFL. What was it? Chiefs, Bills, Lions, Packers?
Eagles.
Okay. But you think there's a 5th team that should be on that graphic?
Well, I think there's more than just 4 top Super Bowl contenders, but yes, I do think there is a 5th team that should get its flowers more than because there's some teams that I also think that should get some flowers from the NFC as well that could make a run. So
a team that has not won a playoff game since the Barack Obama administration, since I was a sophomore in high school.
Yep.
I just want to throw that stat out there while I still have it.
Yep.
The Pittsburgh Steelers. Chus, you think they could be contenders?
I think it's honestly, I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers enough. And I mean that because they're still with the NFL analysts and the people on Twitter or X or wherever, social media, everyone's still talking about the NFL as if Baltimore is going to win the division. And that very well still could happen. I mean, Baltimore still could win the division. I mean, Pittsburgh has a very hard stretch here. Cleveland's one of their last really easier games, I would say. And even then we lost to Cleveland on Thursday night. Now, Pittsburgh has a really long streak of beating Cleveland in Pittsburgh over the last 18 years. I think they've won against the Cleveland Browns at home. So if that trend continues, they should win. But after that, you have to go and play Philly. And then you have to play Kansas City. And then you have to play Cincinnati again. And you have to play Baltimore in there as well. In Baltimore, mind you. So there is a lot that's going to happen for Pittsburgh in there. So there is a chance that Baltimore could take the division. But I don't think people are talking about the Steelers enough. And the reason I think that is because people are pretty much assuming that it's going to be Kansas City or Buffalo. And it very well could be Buffalo that goes all the way. But I think the one thing that's very special about Pittsburgh this year is they look very different than the Pittsburgh Steelers team that we have seen since going back as far as 2018. This team, Ben, even in 2020, after Ben got hurt, he wasn't the same quarterback after 2019. He looked different in 2020 and 2021. Obviously, we had Matt Canada's offensive play calling in there too. But this just feels different. Russell Wilson is really opening up. He's kind of proving those haters wrong. Yeah, obviously we've talked about Cincinnati's defense.
Including you.
Yes, he proved me wrong. I wanted Justin Fields. I wanted Justin Fields to start because I thought for the consistency of the future, I figured, well, might as well have Justin Fields start if he's going to go and start the season 4-2. However, I should have given Russ a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, and I appreciate the comments that told me that I should have, and I'm glad that I did. He didn't look too hot at the beginning of that Jets game, but he just needed to get his feet wet. And now he threw for 400 and some yards in Cincinnati, and it turned to be his second highest career game ever. And that says a lot considering he is in his mid-30s and he's not in Seattle anymore. So what I'm trying to say is the Steelers defense is deep. Obviously, it didn't look too hot against Cincinnati, but I'll give you your flowers. Cincinnati's offense is unbelievable. They are unbelievable. They really are. They are a really good offense. If you guys just had even a slighter better defense, you guys probably would be competing for that divisional title as well. But I think in most cases, I think the defense can do really well and really take over a game. I mean, even Peyton Wilson, a rookie, had a scoop 6 in the game. You have Herbig making plays without Highsmith being in the lineup with an injury. You have defensive players making plays regardless of who's playing. And even if it ends up being a 44-38 game, which, mind you, they put up a stat that the last time the Steelers put up that many points was like years and years and years ago. When the Steelers had reached 41 points, the last time that the Steelers had put up 41 points or more was November 3rd, 2018. And I was at that game. And it was the Steelers versus Carolina, and the Steelers won 55-21, I believe. And Carolina was never seen again. But I think the point being is that if the Steelers defense can, continue to be strong against some of these really good teams, and I think if the offense with Russell Wilson obviously continuing to light it up, he's utilizing all of his weapons. Najee Harris is running like a maniac. Jaylen Warren is doing really well as well. This team is very overlooked because everyone's thinking of Baltimore, Kansas City, and Buffalo. And the problem is the teams that you overlook tend to be the ones that surprise you the most in the playoffs. And I think that since Pittsburgh's not being talked about enough, I think they will make a surprise in the playoffs. And I think they can be a contender. I mean, that goes deeper than me having a dream last night that the Steelers are going to the Super Bowl. It's deeper than that. But I think that this team, I even saw a stat that the last time that the Steelers' defense and offensive percentages were like this, they went on to the Super Bowl in 2008 against the Cardinals. And that was that was a couple of weeks ago. Now, I don't know what it looks like now with the defense kind of fluctuating a little bit, but if the defense is still a top tier defense, regardless of how they've looked over the last couple of weeks. The offense is decent enough to win games. These players like Van Jefferson, you have Van Jefferson, you have Scotty Miller, you have just these random wide receivers getting involved. You have players making plays. He threw to, I believe, 8 different players in the game at one point, and one was not Mike Williams, which is still fascinating to me that they're not utilizing him. But I think it says a lot. Oh, Calvin Austin. I was going to say Calvin Austin.
I was going to say Calvin Austin's been stepping up these last few weeks.
He has. He looks like a wide receiver too, which is crazy. I mean, they drafted him expecting him to be a pretty top player, but he ended up getting hurt. And that's kind of what happened with Roman Wilson this year. Is we were expecting him to be good, but then he kind of fell off because of the injuries. Calvin Austin had the same thing. He was supposed to be really, really good, then he fell off, and now he's kind of stepping into that role. And I think, in my opinion, like you said, these players are stepping up. The team looks very good. They're winning these good matchups. I mean, if this was last year, Josh, we would have gotten mauled by you guys. If you guys would have thrown up 38 points against us, we probably would have lost 38-10. I mean, we would have. And I think that by us winning a blowout game, it shows that this team can win. And the Cleveland game, like I said, Mike Tomlin has a weird Thursday night statistic. Let's look towards the future. I think we can beat the Browns on Sunday. I think we can maybe keep it close with the Eagles. I think we're going to beat Kansas City on Christmas. I'm going to stand by that.
You're going to call your shot.
I am going to call my shot. If the 15-2 Kansas City Chiefs after that day, they will finish with 2 losses, and one of them will be to Pittsburgh. I think that crowd in Pittsburgh will be loud, and I think it'll be ready to go. I'm personally really excited.
Exclusively on Netflix.
exclusively on Netflix, but I do have Netflix, so I will be watching. And it's on local channel because it's Pittsburgh. You can't not have local channel watch. But anyway. But my opinion is I think the way that the offense is looking, even if the defense hasn't been stepping up as much, I think that the way that this team is, if they continue to mold it the way that they are, I mean, he's already hit that 9-win mark. I think that the Steelers are going to make some noise. And I definitely think they're going to win a playoff game. I definitely do. I think that you match them up against some of these other teams. Let's say you put Pittsburgh at the 3rd seed, because they're not getting 1 or 2. There's like no way. I don't see them getting the first round bye, let alone, the 2nd seed. I think that the 4th, like I don't think they're going to get 4th because I think Houston's still kind of iffy up and down. Let's say Pittsburgh does win the division. Your 5th, 6th, and 7th seeded teams are Baltimore, which is a rivalry, and you'll have Baltimore come to home. You'll have them come against you guys in Pittsburgh. And I think that we can, shift some things around and win that game. You have Denver, which although Bo Nix is coming together, I think we can beat that team. And if you have LA come to Pittsburgh again, I think we can win that game again too. And then in the divisional round, it'll really depend on matchups, because at that point, if we're playing Buffalo and Buffalo, it might be a little tough. It might be. Different team than it was last year, but even at moments, there was a little bit of glimmer of hope with Mason Rudolph. So maybe with somebody like Russell Wilson, Buffalo will have their money ran. But I don't know. All it takes is a little. December is the month where you start getting hot. I mean, they say it every year. If Pittsburgh can go on a streak where they win their next 6 games or something ridiculous, will people be talking about Pittsburgh? Maybe. But right now, people are like, these are the only legit contenders. And even in the NFC, I think nobody's talking about Minnesota. I love Detroit, but who rivals Detroit? Who's a big rival?
Packers.
Okay, what? Who else? Yeah, exactly.
The Vikings.
Exactly. So point being is that I don't think people are talking about the Vikings because they're like, oh, the Vikings are. We don't know that. You can't say it's the Lions and the Eagles, because I think that the Vikings can do really well against these teams because they have that. It's the same thing with the Ravens. I think the Ravens can do really well against the Steelers because of that division matchup. And against Philly, that's a whole different discussion. I mean, we get in the NFC discussions and stuff, but I think these teams are not. I think some of these teams aren't being talked about enough. It's just me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, kind of in a similar vein, but slightly different. I want to talk about the Bengals a little bit. I don't know that you should go all in on what the Steelers' offense looked like against the Bengals' defense, primarily because the Bengals' defense is just awful. Like,
well,
even schematically, schematically, the Bengals' defense is terrible. There were plays where I think it was George Pickens. He had a catch. They probably should have only gone for 5 yards, but everyone was leveraged on the inside, and so they're pushing them to the outside. Or excuse me, they're on the outside. They're pushing him back inside instead of the reverse, where you should have someone there to kind of push him out of bounds. And he ended up going for like 30 yards.
And there was another thing. I don't know if you saw this comment. It kind of summed up everything really well. But like when Justin Fields had the clinching run, yes, there was a comment that I saw, and I don't know who it was that commented it. I'm not going to quote exactly who the name is, but they said everybody in the world except for the Bengals defense knew that Justin Fields was going to run on that play. And I think that kind of sums up how the defense for you guys has been playing this year, just in my opinion.
No, you're right. That I tweeted something similar, but that was, I believe,
maybe it was you.
Maybe it was me. I tweeted something similar. Maybe you're quoting me, but it was I believe Jordan Battle and Josh Newton. Josh Newton's
he got hurt during that game too. Didn't he get hurt during that game, Jordan Battle?
Maybe for a few plays, but he's listed as the starter again. But anyway, they were in on that play, and I believe it was both them and maybe Akeem Davis-Gaither, who were supposed to swing over to the left and block Justin Fields. Neither of them, they both bit to the inside on the run. Like, if you go and watch the play, you're going to see them both kind of step to the right onto the inside and then go left, to which that was enough time for Justin Fields to run and get the first down. Like you said, though, everyone in America knew that Justin Fields was going to run to the right for the first down. There should have been a player on that boundary when they lined up who just, stood his ground and said, hey, you're going to have to juke me to get this, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have to work for it, or you're going to have to run me over, do something. And that, that's mainly why I'm saying Lou Anarumo has to go. I thank Lou Anarumo for his service, but I honestly at this point have to wonder how much of this has been Jesse Bates, has been DJ Reader, has been these other guys kind of, elevating Lou Anarumo's schemes, because I have such a hard time. And we can talk about Zach Taylor going. We can talk about that. But he's an offensive coach, and the offense has been playing well, mainly because of Dan Pitcher, I believe. But the defense has been the big issue. And Lou Anarumo has had issues developing players. The schemes make no sense. And I have such a hard time believing every single player on the Bengals defense, except for Trey Hendrickson, regressed at the exact same time.
I agree.
That just doesn't happen. And you can argue that Sheldon Rankins hasn't been a good free agency pickup. Probably not, because he's been sick a lot, hasn't been playing, but he regressed when he has been playing. You got Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson. Both look to have some promise, maybe, but neither of them are going to develop well in this scheme. Miles Murphy, you spent a first-round pick on him, and I'm saying the same thing I've been saying every week, because nothing has changed. Miles Murphy is still taking snaps behind Sam Hubbard, who Sam Hubbard has admitted that he's playing injured, that he's playing slower. Miles Murphy, your former first-round pick, isn't getting time to develop. Joseph Asai isn't getting time to develop. Dax Hill, you spent 2 years of his rookie contract, another first-round pick, trying to make him be a safety that he's not. Why? I don't understand. And this goes to the front office too. If you're not going to draft players in the first round who are going to be immediate impacts, why do you have a first-round pick? I would much rather trade the first-round pick and get someone who they're already developed. You know what they are, because all of the Bengals, besides Jesse Bates, all of the Bengals' defensive studs, for the most part, that we've had, have been developed in other systems first. Trey Hendrickson, Saints. Von Bell, before he was kind of slower, was with the Saints. DJ Reader was with the Texans. Jesse Bates is really the exception to this rule. Logan Wilson you can maybe throw in there. But Lou cannot develop players. And you have to be able to develop players if you're going to have an average defense. An average defense would get this team to an AFC championship game at the very least. The way Joe and Jamar and T are playing. And now we're going to have a ton of questions in this offseason that are going to need answered. The Bengals offense, or the Bengals front office and coaching staff, needs a fire lit under their ass, because they are just kind of, we're in week 14, and we're still saying, it'll all come together at the end. No, it's over. It's done. Joe Burrow he bought his Batmobile, and he is looking over Cincinnati now as Batman, because you know what? It doesn't matter what else he does on the football field, because if he comes in half asleep, he can just say, hey, Jake Browning, go in. It's over.
And it's crazy to me, your defense looked better last year than it does this year.
Yeah, so much better. So much better.
Indeed. You look at the numbers. Like, I'm just looking at your schedule right now. You guys had what? Like Jake Browning for the end half of the season, and you lost 16-10 to the Steelers, and then you won 34-31 over Jacksonville. You shut out. I mean, you shut down Indianapolis 34-14, and then you beat Minnesota 27-24. You lose to Pittsburgh 34-11. You lose to Kansas City 25-17. Then you shut down Cleveland at the end 31-14. And that's just with Browning. And you go further and further back. And I mean, your numbers compared to this year, where like you guys have been in shootouts, and you had the Chargers shootout not 2 weeks ago, and you went into overtime with Baltimore at the earlier part of the season. Then you had this game with Pittsburgh. There's something wrong with the defense. And I mean, I don't know. Did you really lose that many players last year?
We lost
I mean,
DJ Reader, and then we replaced him with Sheldon Rankins was the attempt. But the team does not tackle.
mm-hmm.
I said last week, I said take the over on George Pickens because he's going to hit that. And it hit. I think it hit in the first half.
I believe you were right.
And it's because this team cannot tackle. And that goes back to coaching. I mean, these guys are NFL players. They are clearly good at football, at least at the basic level, if they made it to the NFL. So why is Geno Stone struggling? Why is like these players that we've seen be good are awful now? Like, what are we doing? You can't. Like I said, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've talked about it each week. But I think part of it goes to the team no longer like just feels wanted. Like they don't. The Brown family has valued loyalty a lot with the coaching staff, but I don't know that they necessarily have shown that they value it with the players. And that's arguably more important. Joe Mixon, he did a lot for the Bengals to help them out in terms of cap. And then they cut him. They eventually did trade him when fans kind of, were like, what the heck? But no, they were originally going to cut him. And then 2 days later, they traded him for a 7th round pick to the Houston Texans. Then Trey Hendrickson had issues paying him. Is that going to happen? T. Higgins, they tagged him. Are they going to pay him this offseason? We don't know. Are they going to do right by him? They should, I believe, because T. Higgins has given a lot to this team. And then Jamar Chase being the big one. Like, what's going to happen with that? There are a lot of things with this locker room in the front office that the team, the players may be like, hey, this team doesn't really care about me. And, it's that morale is important. Think about it like in an office space. We're around Christmas time here. There's a lot of companies that are going to give out Christmas bonuses, big money. And, that is usually more of a morale boost than the company that gives out a pen with the company name on it and says Merry Christmas. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The Bengals right now are the team are the company that gives out the pen. And it says Cincinnati Bengals on it. It's like, welcome to the team. It's like, what? No, I want more. They want money. They want their guaranteed money. And the thing, there's so much wrong with how the Bengals run their front office. It's so frustrating. If the Bengals tag T again, and I mean like tag, and then they're like, you have to play again this year, they would have spent, I believe, $48 million fully guaranteed, which you probably could have guaranteed him in a contract when you extended him and spread out over multiple years. Or like just, do better. Expand your scouting department. Put money into that. It's pretty embarrassing that PFF is located in Cincinnati, Ohio, and yet the Bengals have one of the smallest and worst scouting departments. I'm not saying that you go like hire guys from PFF or that they should combine or anything like that. But, there are good scouts located in Cincinnati, Ohio. This should not be as big of a problem as it is. And it's extremely frustrating. And it has been for years. The entire franchise has always been run like that. But it's the 21st century. You have Joe Burrow. You have Jamar Chase. Time to change things.
Yeah.
That's my rant.
I mean, better than I do.
But I mean, why? I mean, the Steelers, the Ravens, not really the Browns, but the Steelers and the Ravens find ways to win. They find ways to elevate their talent that isn't like even necessarily there.
I mean, the
Like
head coaches, I think, also have a lot for that as well. I mean, I don't think Zach Taylor's on the same level as like Tomlin or Harbaugh, but
your coordinators even find ways on defense.
yeah,
So for
Matt
the
Canada.
Steelers, but for the Steelers, the defense, the
Mhm.
defensive coordinators has found ways to elevate the talent that he has available.
Yes.
And there are a lot of talented players on the Steelers defense, but there have also been a lot of injuries. And they haven't been as noticeable because the guys who are next up help out. Geno Stone came from the Baltimore Ravens. He looked great. It looked like, I said this is going to be a great safety pickup coming from a great system. Now he's taking weird angles on his tackles. Some people have suggested that he's like a spy for the Ravens. And just like playing bad intentionally. That's how bad he's playing. Like I think he's 66 of 66 ranked safeties.
That's really awkward. Like that is like really, really.
And that's where we're at. I mean, it's rough. And like you said, I feel like it was logical to say the Bengals went 9-8 with Jake Browning. Only really lost DJ Reader. You drafted 2 DTs. You signed another DT in free agency to replace Reader, presumably, assuming the scheme isn't crap. Ended up being crap. You've signed a true safety now in Geno Stone. You're moving Dax to outside corner to replace Chidobe Awuzie. Like, there was a plan. I'll give them that. I'm not saying it was a great plan, but there was a plan. And somehow, with Joe Burrow having an MVP level season, this team is going to miss the playoffs already with 8 losses.
Most likely, yeah.
Unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Fire everyone. Fire everyone.
I'm good with it.
Fire everyone. I mean, I don't know what else you would do from there, but fire everyone.
I would keep Darren Simmons, the special teams coordinator, but maybe Dan Pitcher. But other than that, yeah, I'm down with firing everyone. I mean, it's just bad. And now Logan Wilson is out for the season. Very likely. Actually, he is out for the season with a knee injury. Evan McPherson is going to miss multiple weeks with a groin injury. They've signed Cade York to replace him. It's rough in Cincinnati. And I said on Twitter, I don't live in Cincinnati. I can't go to games all the time. I don't go to concerts at Acrisure or Paycor Stadium. And
you don't go to Acrisure. You have been to one at PNC Park though.
Yes, and I don't go to Paycor Stadium for concerts, so maybe I'm not the best person to talk, And I get they've got Hamilton County money, so they've got to listen to Hamilton County a little bit too, and I understand that aspect of things. But as an outsider and as a Bengals fan, I would much rather have a larger scouting department than fancy TVs and maybe slightly better concession stands. You know what I'm saying? Like, because at the end of the day, if the product on the field isn't good, no one's going to come to the stadium to look at the fancy TVs and eat at those slightly better concession stands.
Good point.
So, and I know it's not as simple as that, but I'm invest in this team better. And I know that
they should invest in Little Caesars too.
In Little Caesars?
Yeah, like have like a Little Caesars in the concession stands, because we added a Little Caesars this year and look at our success.
That's clear. It's all connected.
It's all connected. I think if you guys get a Little Caesars inside Paycor, I think maybe it'll change everything for you guys next year.
There's a Cincinnati like localized pizza place, I believe, that's in there, and I forget the name of it. I think it starts with a G. Forgive me, Cincinnatians, but that's all I've got to say. I'm not going to clip that. If people make it to the end of the show, they can hear it. Because I've said the same thing every week.
You could clip it again if you really wanted to.
I'm good. Just, you got anything else?
You just make it the same title as last time. and then just say part 2.
Well, I'm starting to look at draft prospects, so I'll say that much. But
What kind of prospects? Wide receiver, definitely
I
not
guess some
quarterback.
tight end, defensive tackle, offensive guard guys listed on here that I got. Wide receiver. So
okay. Well, yeah, I think that's all I got for now. Big game against the Browns this week, and let's take down them Brownies.
okay. Well, thank you for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube at No Butts Show. Our social media pages are NoButts_show on Instagram, where I post a ton of news and updates, especially injuries. I've been trying to do that more on YouTube as well, but check that out on Instagram. That's NoButts_show. My Twitter is Josh_Butts_2001. And if you would like to reach us, you can email us at bullmoosepodcast2. That's the number 2 at gmail.com. Finally, our spread shop will be in the description, so check out the merch. Once again, if you enjoyed today's show, like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, go do something nice for someone.